Here's the natural order of enshittification. So, 1. First, platforms are good to their users. 2. Then they abuse their users to make things better for their business customers. 3. Next, they abuse those business customers to claw back all the value for themselves. And 4, finally, they have become a giant pile of shit. I'm going to be talking about Substack and Enshittification, which is something I've been pondering and wondering. I might write an article, so this is me kind of going through my thoughts on camera for some reason. I want to do more of this kind of live streaming thing this year. Whether it will pan out or not, we shall find out. But yeah, Substack and Enshittification. So just from my perspective, I'm a fiction writer. I've been serializing something called Tales from the Drivers for the last 4.5 years. That wrapped up in January, so I'm now in search of a new project, which is quite exciting. But yeah, I publish fiction, and I publish articles about writing serial fiction via my newsletter. And I've been doing this since 2021. That's when I started doing the newsletter properly and joined Substack. And a lot has changed since then. Substack has grown enormously and added features, changed features, and keeping track of it all has been exciting, but kind of concerning at times as well, because the more success we have on a platform, like if it starts to work for us, like any slight change can be terrifying, because you think it's going to be the one that's going to like pull the rug out and mess everything up. And rather timely, this book came out. So Cory Doctorow wrote this book called Enshittification. He actually coined the term like 4 years ago, I think. Cory's a science fiction writer and kind of digital rights activist. And he finally got around to putting a book together about enshittification and sort of defining it a bit more, because I think originally it was a term he threw out almost like semi-jokingly, and then it took hold and everyone was like, yes, that is the correct word to describe the internet in the 2020s. And yeah, the subtitle on this book is Why Everything Suddenly Got Worse and What to Do About It. I've only just started reading it. As you can see, I'm not very far through. But I'm just going to read his definition of enshittification just before I start talking about Substack specifically, because I think it's relevant to what we're talking about here. So, yeah, I'll just read from the book here. Obligatory bookcase background for podcasting, of course, yes. So yeah, this is what Cory writes in the introduction to this. When doctors observe patients who are sick with a novel pathogen, their first order of business is creating a natural history of the disease. This natural history is an ordered catalogue of the disease's progress. What symptoms do patients exhibit, and in which order? Here's the natural order of enshittification. So, 1. First, platforms are good to their users. 2. Then they abuse their users to make things better for their business customers. 3. Next, they abuse those business customers to claw back all the value for themselves. And 4, finally, they have become a giant pile of shit. So that's his definition of enshittification. And, it's meant to be kind of funny, but also it does just describe a lot of the way platforms have gone over the last few years, whether we're talking Facebook or Twitter or YouTube or Google, like to varying degrees, and your opinions on exactly how bad, how much of an epidemic this is will vary depending on your own experience. But yeah, I've withdrawn from most social media for this reason. I used to actively enjoy posting on Twitter about 10, 15 years ago. And that just seems like a long time ago now. And reading Enshittification, the book, has got me thinking about Substack and where that is on that trajectory of those 4, kind of a natural history of enshittification. Like, where are we on it? Are we stage 1, 2, 3, 4? And there's not really an easy answer to that, I don't think. So yeah, this is very much me coming at it from the point of view of a fiction writer. by the way, there's a really good interview with Cory Doctorow on the Blood in the Machine newsletter, via Merchant's newsletter. If you go and find that out, it's a really good chat between the two of them all about this. And obviously they will talk about enshittification much more eloquently and in more detail than I'm trying to do here. But yeah, to look at Substack specifically, and where we're at with it. And this is me coming at it from the point of view of a serial fiction writer who has enjoyed using Substack a lot, has got a lot out of it, and thinks it could be something even better. Hi, Sally. So yeah, I think there's 3 core features when it comes to Substack, which is kind of why I started here, but it's also why I'm still here. And they also serve as protections, in theory, against enshittification. So number 1 is the fact that we own our list. So if you write on Substack, you own the email list. It's not hidden behind, Twitter followers or something like that. Like, people subscribe to your newsletter, you get those emails. You can also export all your data, your content and that list, and take it with you. So worst case scenario, or if you just want to do something different, you can take that information, take that data, and go set up somewhere else. You can create your own bespoke blog, or you can go and use Ghost or Beehive or one of the other services. And the third thing for me is just the core newsletter functionality. So the fact that you can very quickly write a newsletter and then send it out to your list. No fuss, nothing getting in the way, minimal algorithmic shenanigans. Like, if someone's on your email list and you send them an email, they will get the email. Although there's a few complications to that as well. So yeah, those 3 things: owning your list, being able to export your data, and the core newsletter functionality. Like, those 3 things are the critical protections for me in terms of hopefully Substack not going too far down the enshittification route. But let's talk about switching cost. So this is something that comes up in the book. The fact that the longer you're on a platform, and the more successful the platform is, the higher the switching cost. So, if first time you join Facebook, you could quit Facebook very easily. But once, like, all your friends are on Facebook, it becomes much harder, because if you leave and they stay, then that's not a nice place to be. And each of your friends have their own network of friends. So that kind of network effect expands and expands. It's very good for Facebook. Initially, it's great for users as well. But every time a platform has that kind of success, it then becomes harder to leave that platform if you want, because it only really makes sense to leave if you can get all your friends to leave at the same time. And that's how we end up kind of trapped. So what started off as a really cool, useful platform ends up becoming something that feels a bit more like a prison. And then they can start to enshittify the platform and make it worse and worse because we can't leave. Now, in theory, because we can export our data and we own our list, the cost of switching is much lower on Substack. So, if you were very successful on Twitter or Instagram, you built up hundreds of thousands of followers, you built a business around it perhaps. To leave those platforms meant leaving all of that success behind. So that entire network and whatever you were using it for just goes. You can't take it with you to a comparable platform or your own bespoke thing. On Substack, that's not the case. If as writers we want to leave, we can just take our stuff and go somewhere else. And that's immensely powerful and quite unusual. And it's surprising that they did that. Like, they built into the platform a low switching cost. In theory, it's not quite that simple, because over time, as Substack has expanded as a platform and added more and more features, the switching cost gets higher and more complicated. So, for example, at the moment, you can obviously write articles and send them out as newsletters. You also have a nice website where your archive sits. You can upload videos, which automatically get propagated out to YouTube and LinkedIn. You can create and publish podcasts, which also then automatically go out to Apple Podcasts and the other usual libraries. You could do live streams like we're doing right now. There's Substack Notes, which is a social platform where you can meet other people and share your work and hopefully find new readers and subscribers. There's the recommendation system, and there's the Substack app. These are all good features, which are very useful and give us power. But the more we lean into these features, the higher the switching cost becomes, because all of a sudden leaving Substack is not quite as simple as it. But back when it was just a newsletter platform, when it was just newsletters, I could take my email list and just go over to Ghost or MailChimp or something and carry on without really losing anything at all. Whereas now the idea of not using Substack, but still trying to do videos and live streams and podcasts, like, it's very possible, but it's vastly more complicated because you suddenly have to engage directly with multiple platforms, keep track of all that stuff. The admin cost goes massively higher. And the big benefit I find from Substack is that I could do all of this stuff without it consuming my life in terms of the admin. I can just focus on the writing or doing videos or recording a podcast or whatever it is I want to do. Like, you can focus on the thing rather than all the admin faff around it, which is cool. But yeah, you can't really do that anywhere else in that kind of one place kind of scenario. And we've seen this, I think, with people who have left Substack, who've been very successful, potentially left Substack for whatever reason, maybe ethical reasons, maybe they want more control, they wanted specific features, whatever it may be. And they go off and use Ghost for a bit or Beehive for a bit. And then 6 months, a year later, they come back, despite having made a big song and dance of leaving. And then they return because actually that cost of switching was really high. And even though they made the switch, maybe they lost half their subscribers, or they didn't gain any new subscribers after they switched away. So simply by providing a good service, they're making the cost of switching difficult because there's no decent competition at the moment. If you're just comparing sending a newsletter, there's lots of competition, Ghost, Beehive, MailChimp, Button Down, that kind of thing. But if you're comparing the entire feature set, then yeah, that gets much more tricky. And actually what also becomes a sort of complicating factor here is the fact that separately to Substack, email services themselves are being enshittified and will probably be increasingly so. So yeah, I think we've all heard how Gmail wants to go towards a thing where you get an AI summary of your emails. So rather than, going through your emails yourself, you'll just get a summary that says, here's your important stuff. Do you want to reply with this? Which is one of those AI features that, on the surface sounds maybe useful. And if you actually were paying like an assistant or a secretary, a human, to do it, might be reliable. But having an AI do it is problematic. But then it becomes extra problematic for publishers like us, because we don't want an AI summary summarizing the email we just sent. We want the person who subscribed to actually read the newsletter. Like, if I've just sent out a new chapter of a story I'm writing, I don't want an AI summarizing that or skimming over it. And the reader on the other end who chose to subscribe for some reason in the past probably doesn't want that either. So with that risk, email, which has been the most reliable communications system on the internet for, forever, since it started, basically, like, as other platforms and social media has risen and fallen, email's always been there. Email now is, it's vulnerable and fragile, I think. And that's where, again, the Substack app comes in, which I was a problematic concept because it does lock in readers to the app. And again, it raises the switch cost, because if all your readers are getting your content through the app and then you try and go to Ghost or something, then all of a sudden they're not going to be getting the stuff that you write in the same way. But, if email systems go down the tube, then you can imagine the app being a bit of a life raft, but it could still equally turn into a prison. So, none of this is particularly nice. Like, I think we're all, as creators or readers or viewers, we're stuck in a slightly tricky age of the internet where we're kind of constantly running away from things that are breaking around us. Hence, Enshittification and the Enshitter scene, as Cory Doctorow calls it, which I kind of like. So something Substack, like the founders, point to a lot is the economic model around Substack publications. And the idea that we don't pay to have a Substack publication. and advertisers don't pay Substack to inject into feeds and that kind of thing. Like, they make their money when writers and creators make money. So, if I have some paid subscribers on my newsletter, Substack takes 10%. In my case, that's not going to keep the lights on at Substack HQ, but with some of the massive, huge newsletters, they're bringing in a lot of money. And their whole concept is that by framing it that way, it means that the business decisions they make have to benefit the writers and creators, because that's how ultimately Substack then makes money. And it's a really good theory. And you can see how it's a much healthier way of going about things than the way Twitter and Meta went, where when they had to make money, they were like, right, we'll have adverts, and that is our primary focus. And then all of their business decisions go towards helping the advertisers, which is why everyone's feeds get progressively worse over time. I think that's stage 2 of the enshittification, right? And then after that, they then start treating their business customers badly as well, and then everything's a big pile of shit. Cory Doctorow's words, not mine. So that economic model of Substack is it's very appealing and it kind of works, but the problem is that it doesn't seem to be quite adding up for them yet. So they're still getting a lot of external investment and financing from external parties and venture capital type stuff, which has enabled them to grow presumably and add features faster and all that kind of thing. But the problem is that the more funding they get that is outside of that core model, the more tempted they will be, the more perverse incentives they'll have to optimize for those investors rather than for the core users. And the less powerful that kind of, when we make money, you make money. No, other way around. When we make money, they make money. That whole concept sort of falls apart slightly the more funding you get from elsewhere. We'll see. We'll see how that kind of pans out. So the last bit, I think, when it comes to Substack and enshittification, is the fact that many users have been going on about it, having been enshittified for years now. Like, ever since I arrived in 2021, people have been like, oh, it's all over. Substack's done. No, it's terrible. It was much better in 2017 or what have you. And with every new feature, there's like an immense amount of teeth gnashing, right? So back in the day, it was just newsletters. And then when they introduced Substack Notes, everyone was like, no, it's over, because they've added social media now. It's going to ruin everything. And then you have the ability to create your own podcasts. It's like, well, no, Substack's about writing. It's not about audio. And then they committed the worst sin possible, which was to enable video. And all the writers freaked out because video is like the enemy, apparently. Then live streams like this didn't used to be a feature of Substack. This appeared, year and a half ago, maybe? And each time there's been this kind of like cataclysmic, apocalyptic worry that it's going to be the end. And it kind of never has been, because I think all these new features are optional and very easily ignored. Like, if you're not into creating video, you don't have to. If you're not into watching video, then you probably won't see much video. You can just subscribe to people who don't do that, and then you'll just see their long form writing and everything's fine. It's all been kind of opt in, I suppose, and not in your face. And for me, it comes back to those 3 central things. Like, can you still own your email list? Yes. Can you still download your data? Yes. Does it still have the core newsletter functionality? Yes. So all the additional features they've added around the edge haven't really got in the way of the core newsletter thing. As long as I can still write stuff and then send it out on a newsletter, I'm kind of okay. But if a video creator comes along and wants to use all those features, then that's cool. It doesn't really affect me. So the one exception, in my opinion, which is a very recent one, which was the first time I think that I got irritated and I did a bit of the teeth gnashing myself, right? Was this weird addition of Polymarket. So Polymarket is a thing that is actually illegal in the UK. Like, we can look at it, but we can't bet on it. It's illegal gambling. That's how it's classified here. It's apparently a really big thing in the States. I don't really understand the appeal of it. It appears to be, you can go and see how people are betting on real world events and what might be coming up. So it's like a big crowdsourced way of seeing what most people think, which doesn't sound very interesting to me. I'm kind of more interested in like the weird niche people and what they're thinking, not what like everyone generally is thinking is going to happen. This has always been something that you can embed polymarket charts into posts, which is cool. Like if people want to write and use polymarket data, that's completely fine. But the new thing they've done with this new partnership is if you're creating a note, suddenly there's this extra icon. So on the three icons that you have when you're making a note on Substack, you've got images and videos for adding those to your note. And then you've got this weird new one, which is polymarket. When you click that, it opens up a little window with the top 6 or something, polymarket bets, which are all kind of highly US news focused. So it's not even relevant to the UK, obviously, because we're not allowed to actually use it in the UK. And it's just a bit weird because putting that up with equal prominence to adding an image or adding a video to a note just seems a bit odd to me. A bit of a strange design decision. And also, it's basically putting like a betting shop right in the foyer of the public library. That's kind of how I see Substack. I mean, I know there's a wide range of content on Substack, some of which I would not want to encounter and read. But generally, like, you can find really interesting essays and articles and long form writing and videos and interviews and all that kind of stuff. It's the closest that the internet at the moment has to, a wide range of interesting thoughts in one place, I suppose. And all of a sudden when you go in now, they're like, hey, do you want to place a bet? Do you want to gamble on something? It's like, not really. It's like when you look at a high street in a town that used to be full of, amazing independent shops, maybe a few chain shops, but, it was vibrant and there was a nice pub and a cafe and restaurants and a market and a kids play area. And now all the shops are shuttered up and there's just gambling shops all the way down the row. It's weird. I don't like it. It makes me feel a bit icky. There's like ways they could do it through design that would make more sense. So it's like, it's very odd to have polymarket, but to not be able to just, I don't know, search YouTube and insert a video, for example. You can't just search Wikipedia and add a Wikipedia link. I mean, anything like that. So, maybe in our settings, have a whole bunch of these integrations and we can just choose which ones we want. Like if someone writes a lot about YouTube videos, for example, they could turn on that and then they get a little quick icon for searching and adding that stuff to their posts. That might be useful. But forcing everyone to look at this polymarket thing, super weird. But those 3 core features are still there. I can still own my list, export my data. I can still just send newsletters out. And, over 90% of my subscribers still get it via email. And most of them probably don't care what I use to write it. They just want to read whatever it is that I'm writing. And I imagine that's the case for a lot of people who subscribe to publications. Like the nuts and bolts behind the scenes is not relevant, really. So like this is all kind of inside baseball stuff, I suppose. But it's always contributing to that concern that the platform that we use, and which has done such a good job over the years, not without controversy, not without missteps and problems, but I think we're all on high alert because so many of the platforms that we regularly used without really thinking about it 10, 15 years ago are either gone or fully enshittified. And basically don't want that to happen to Substack. Just looking in the comments here. Yeah, there seems to be a lot of confusion about the whole polymarket thing and where that's come from. I get the feeling, because like Mills Baker, who's head of design at Substack and writes really eloquently and interestingly about design. If you read any of his stuff or watch him in interviews, like, this feels like it was something that came from on high and someone was just like, put this icon in and it had to be done. Doesn't feel like something that has the usual elegance of the Substack interface. But we shall see. I think a bigger question, certainly for me as a serial fiction writer and having just spent 4.5 years on a weekly serial that wrapped up in January, is Substack actually the right place for serial fiction? I was CC'd into a conversation by Ian Daniels, who CC'd me into this chat he was having with someone called Max Winter, who is very clear that they post their fiction, but they don't post serial fiction on Substack because they don't think the platform is a good fit for that material. I completely understand what they're saying. At the same time, it's hard to see what the alternatives are. So there are platforms designed for serial fiction, like Wattpad and Tapas and all of that lot, but they immediately fail on those three things. Like you don't own your follower reader list. You can't export your data. You can't just directly contact your readers. It's all done through this kind of obscure platform and highly algorithmic stuff. So, Substack is kind of the best fit, even if it's an awkward fit. There's some, I think we've all been talking about for years, like certain feature tweaks they can make to make the serial fiction experience much nicer for readers. Like it's quite nice as a writer, but for readers, it's a bit of a fiddle. But anyway, those are my thoughts on Substack and Enshittification. So it's kind of like a let's keep an eye and be vigilant type response. But I don't think we're really anywhere near stage 2 or stage 3 yet. I think we're still in the being good to the users, but you can see the temptations on the horizon and where they could very easily get derailed. But the fact that Substack hasn't been derailed yet is the surprise, I think. When you look at the trajectory of every other platform, pretty much, particularly ones that have tried to get this big and incorporate social features and that kind of stuff. So yeah, we shall see. Anyway, I'll leave it there. But yeah, thanks for coming along and listening to me rambling. I might turn this into a post at some point. But yeah, an ongoing thing. Anyway, I highly recommend Enshittification. I'm making my way through it, and I will probably have further thoughts once I've actually read the whole thing. It's not just a big depressing book either. There's a whole section on what we can do about it. So I'm hoping once I get to that, it will cheer me up, and then maybe I can share some of that as well. But in the meantime, just go and get the book because it's really good. Cory Doctorow knows what he's talking about. Okay, have a nice rest of your day or evening. I'm going to go to bed because it's really late here. Okay, thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.